You've taken the important steps to pick the proper seed, fertilizer program, and manage your early weed control. Now is not the time to become lax in managing your growing crops needs this season. On the next 3 episodes of the FieldLink Podcast, we'll highlight yield-enhancing agronomic tips that can help you maximize your return on investment for your crop this season. On this episode, we highlight the importance of in-season nitrogen management for your actively growing crop today, and how feeding the plant now can have big payoffs at harvest this fall. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville to discuss the latest in the commodity markets. Finally, be sure to make plans to join us in Memphis, Tennessee at the Innovation Expo on Thursday, July 9th. Explore the latest innovations from the Helena Products Group and learn about the latest agronomy and seed innovations, plus explore the pipeline of products from HPG. Contact your Helena representative to reserve your spot today. And welcome to FieldLink. On this episode, we're going to be part 1 of a 3-part series where we're talking about return on investment. In-season ROI. What can we do today to impact our return on investment for 2026? And joining us on this episode is Jason Gregory. Jason is a brand manager for the Helena Products Group, and today we're going to be talking about Coron. In addition, Dr. Clay Perkins, who's R&D specialist here at the Helena Products Group, is also joining us here in the FieldLink studio. Guys, welcome to FieldLink.
Excited to be here, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Hey, it's excited to have you guys here to talk about, what are some things that we can do to impact yield this year as we're looking at the crop in 2026. We've got a wide range of environmental things going on across the United States. We started off the season with, a lot of concerns and questions around fertility costs and investments, and here we are today. We've got a crop across the United States that, for the most part, looks pretty darn good. And now we're starting to see some instances where, in some fields, we might be running a little bit short on nitrogen. So what are some things that we can do to impact our return on investment? A lot of focus on input costs and input management, managing the dollars early on this season, and obviously still today. But the market's changed, hasn't it, Jason?
I don't know. I've seen a market change like this since I've been in agriculture. Honestly, even COVID was, it seemed a little less volatile during COVID than we are today, honestly.
Yeah. And you look at not just what's going on in the field today, but really around the world. We're impacted with a lot of global challenges. Obviously, the war in Iran has changed things a little bit, but now we're starting to see things, free up a little bit with some of the recent agreements in Iran, and fuel prices are kind of coming down. So we're starting to see some changes in fertilizer, which is great for agriculture. But guys, we got a crop out there right now that we've got to manage, and we need to manage yield.
Absolutely. I think about it, and if you listen to this podcast, you've probably heard me talk about this before. I always like to think of our crops as athletes, and right now we're right in the middle of not even in the middle. You look at our corn crop right now, we're probably at mile 20 of a 26.2 mile marathon.
Right.
And maybe when we ate that breakfast of nitrogen, maybe we looked at the price and said, you know what, I'm going to have 1 egg instead of 2.
There you go.
Or maybe we cut back a little bit, or to your point, maybe it rained and that urea or nitrogen's in China right now, right?
Yeah,
so what we need to do is say, all right, what can we do to make sure we finish that marathon and get those last 6 miles in, and do it in a way that we're going to do it well and set, our personal record or whatever you want to call it. But really, to your point, bring and put money in our pocket.
So, Jason, let's talk about that. One of the tactics, one of the tools that's in the toolbox here at Helena is Coron Metra. That's one of the products that we can do to help maybe offset some of these nitrogen challenges.
That's right. And honestly, even if you don't have a challenge, I mean, we Coron Metra is the reason I'm sitting here in Memphis today.
Yeah.
I love it. It's been my favorite product probably since I started at Helena 14 years ago. And when this role came open, because it was Coron Metra, I'm like, hey, I want that job.
Right.
You know, I've seen it work personally time and time again. I've seen the yield bump. I've heard the stories of pilots, you know, flying over growers' fields and coming back and asking one of our sales reps, what'd you put on that field over there? Or,
right.
you know, I've heard the anecdotal things of, you know, we put it out with an insecticide and this field seemed to work much better, you know, and we could talk about, you know, why that might be than the field next door. And I've just seen it work so many times, and Clay's more into math and statistics, and I mean he could choke you with the amount of data we have on Coron Metra through the years. But I love it so much. I've seen it work so often that I think it's almost just a no-brainer, no matter what the situation we're in.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point. Now, a lot of listeners are probably familiar with Coron, Dr. Perkins, but today we're talking about Coron Metra. What's the difference with Metra versus, I guess, your daddy's Coron?
Right. So, you know, Jason was talking about, you know, running that race and keeping on that same trend. You know, some of these racers are taking gel packs as they run to keep them going. It's that extra fuel. You can kind of treat that Metra as that gel pack, adding that to that Coron, giving it a little extra. But it helps with, you know, the nutrient uptake. It helps with, you know, tanks mix compatibility. It brings a lot more to the table, and, you know, we've seen promising results out of adding that to the tank.
Right. And so Metra, kind of unique because it also has ENC formulation. Tell us about ENC formulation.
Right. So that, you know, that's kind of, you know, I was talking about the gel pack. It's the, you know, that extra, you know, we'll call it the multivitamin type trend, it, you know, helping with that nutrient uptake. It wakes everything up, you know, keeps you running.
Yeah. It's just that little bit extra, isn't it, Jason? In addition to that formulated, you know, patented nitrogen that we have.
That's right. That's right. I was actually kind of playing around with it the other day, and something just popped in my head, you know, because one of the reasons we developed Metra, honestly, is to answer competition. If I'm being honest with you. I mean, there's a lot of 2500 Bs out there that say same as Coron, you know, only cheaper stuff.
A lot of wannabes.
They're really, honestly,
imitators, right?
No question. And that's one of the reasons we started looking at things. You know, how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we, and then, you know, we threw ENC formulation technology in there. Honestly, as much as I hate to say it, it was, you know, we all heard Johnny Roberts, you know, we've heard that story.
One of our historical directors of development here at the Helena Products Group for over 40 years.
Absolutely. And you know, this thing, he didn't even remember it. I mean, I was there when the idea came up. He didn't even remember it. It was like we're just going to throw it in and try it. And then he told me, he's like, you know, all of a sudden stuff started coming back. We're like, holy crap, we got something.
We got something different, right? So, yeah.
But, you know, I like to think of it like this. Same analysis, different construction, honestly. You have a lot of things out there that say 2500 with 0.5% boron or whatever, but they're not constructed the same way. They don't have the ENC formulation technology built into it. You know, you may have a house that looks the exact same on the outside. It may be a 2x4 or a 2x6 construction. Which one do you want? Right. You know, do you want a brick veneer or do you want a whole brick house? You know, I think when you look at those things, I can tell you that we're bringing the 2x6 with a full brick house behind it, and we're delivering time and time again with that.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about that delivery. And Clay, you've got a lot of history when it comes to Coron and Coron Metra in terms of a research standpoint.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about the years and years of history you guys have.
Yeah, Jason and I were talking about this yesterday. I think we would argue this might be one of the highest tested products that Helena HPG has. You know, that's over, 28 years of research, over, 2,000 different research trials, 20 plus crops coast to coast. I mean, this, every environment, every growing condition, it's been tested in, and steady results follow that up.
I think that's an important point. 20 plus years, we've got multiple locations, multiple growing seasons. That's something that's often overlooked because we all know in agriculture, every year's different. And when you get a product like Coron Metra that's performing in really all of those years, you can have a lot of levels of confidence, can't you?
Correct. Yeah.
So talk to us about those win rates. What are you guys seeing? What kind of, I guess, yield advantages? That's what we're talking about is ROI today. So
that's right.
It all starts with yield.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, when we launched Metra and looking at corn, that's a big one for us. I mean, 80% win rate, over 8 bushel increase. Going with Coron Metra, soybeans is the same. That's a 2 bushel increase. 70% win rate there. So it's been very consistent, and putting that Metra into that formulation with Coron has paid off.
Really? Wow. So, okay, one more time. For corn, we're seeing what kind of win rates on average?
80% win rate.
80% win rates. Boy, it's hard to argue with. You got to take those numbers to Vegas to get any better than that, can't you?
I'd take it. I'll tell you that right.
For sure.
I might be retired if I did.
Yeah. Okay. And now soybeans you mentioned, and I think sometimes there's this idea that we don't need to put nitrogen on soybeans. They produce their own nitrogen, but Dr. Perkins, that's not always true, is it?
No.
Yeah, we're dealing with a crop that. Again, I kind of bring it back, Jason. Soybeans were kind of an afterthought many, many years ago as a crop. Today, we're really banging for yield, and we're pushing these things to go. We need that 70-plus bushels, and the only way to get that is adding nitrogen.
That's something, one of the, you have pivotal moments in your career, right? Or things that always stick with you. And I remember I was talking with an extension agent from Arkansas. Mm-hmm. I actually coached his sons in football.
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
And shortly after I got into ag, I used to coach football. And I called him up one day and we were just talking, just catching up. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, your soybean will make about enough nitrogen to hit 70 bushels, and that's it. You want to make anything more than 70 bushels, you're going to have to supplement nitrogen. And that is the case time and time again. And to your point, I've heard Jody say, we're our own worst enemy. Honestly, with prices where they are.
Jody Lawrence.
Jody Lawrence.
With the FieldLink Market Report.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Where the prices where they are, guys, we got to make yield. Right. We got to be above 70 bushels. I mean, we got to start thinking about, when we look at ROI and stuff like that, we always talk bushels and things of that nature. We got to start thinking it more than just how many bushels I'm going to get. Let's start thinking about, what is our nitrogen intake and how many bushels are we getting per unit of nitrogen? What's our nitrogen efficiency rate and things of that nature. And when you look at that and trying to grow the most efficient crop and get us to where we want to be so that we're not our own worst enemy and get the most out of every dollar we spend, then that's when we start looking at Coron Metra and adding it to that tank for our soybeans to get above that 70 bushels. Otherwise, what are we doing? I mean, we don't want to get into where we're just trying to break even. The goal here is for all of us, the farmer, Helena, everybody, to make money.
Right. Yeah, and this is one of those years where, as we talked about on the opening of the podcast, where growers are really watching their pennies early on, and we needed to. We still do. But you can't out-yield your way to prosperity here if you're not putting some of these products like Coron Metra on top to manage that nitrogen. Okay, so Dr. Perkins, talk to us about the multiple crops. We've talked a little bit about corn. We've talked a little bit about soybeans. Talk to us about cotton. What's the need for nitrogen with cotton?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've talked about it. It's foliar feeding that crop with this nitrogen out of Coron to, get us to the finish line. And so, cotton's a great example. It's constantly putting on fruit. We got to have that food there ready for it to take up and, keep producing more fruit, increase that yield, and, ultimately, put that crop across the finish line.
And, cotton's one thing, but we've got a lot of other crops. Earlier on, you talked about 20 different crops. I mean, it doesn't end with corn, soybeans, and cotton here. Wheat. Let's talk about cereal grains. I mean, this is a no-brainer, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's several other crops. I mean, like I said, coast to coast, over 20 different crops. I mean, your specialty, your turf, your, tree nuts, your, bell peppers. I mean, it's everything.
Well, and I'll point out, too, we have several different versions or formulations, if you will, of Coron Metra.
Sure,
We're not just talking about the 25B. You bring up cotton.
Yep.
A lot of our markets on cotton, we started with Coron Metra 10, which is a 10-0-10. So 10% nitrogen, 10% potassium. Really, what we were shooting for was the potassium part.
Okay.
But we were using our Coron technology to drive potassium into the crop. And we see that was just a benefit. That 1-to-1, NK ratio just seemed perfect for the cotton crop, And then honestly, it was not just working on cotton, but you look in the Southeast, they use it on corn as well, even though nitrogen is the most hungry part of corn, right? Potassium is very important, and potassium can leach. So we've got answers. We talk about Metra Full Bore, which is boron based product, but its basis starts with controlled release nitrogen, and we use that aspect to help drive the boron into the plant. And of course, when we added the ENC formulation technology to it, it's an old legacy full bore product.
Right.
Now Metra Full Bore, golly, again, was an afterthought, and we cannot get it to stop yielding extra when we add ENC formulation technology to our Coron products.
Wow. Yeah. And it's just continues to prove on that there's lots of different flavors of Coron Metra out there. And depending upon your farm, your field, your acre, we probably have a formulation for you.
That's right. That's what we're here for, to make the most agronomic, best decision to help you get your ROI, is where we are, based on your farm, your field, your crop.
What's interesting is I think this is a testament to our theme here at the Helena Products Group is innovation never stops. And you guys are certainly doing that with the Coron brand line, introducing Metra and Metra Full Bore. Dr. Perkins, you're working on a lot of different futuristic products in this area. What's the future of Coron Metra?
Right. And Jason and I were just in a meeting earlier this morning, talking about building another protocol with a different Metra product. I think we're working on, 3, 4, 5 other versions of Coron or Metra, full something, looking at different micronutrients or whatever, combination agronomically makes sense that we can, bring the right solution to that grower and that salesman.
And that's coming from honestly, it's coming from the field level. That's coming from what the growers are asking for, asking our sales folks for, and in their need in their crops. And honestly, a lot of it is we're learning today what 70 plus bushel needs of beans are. We talk about nitrogen, it needs more nitrogen, but nitrogen is not the only aspect of that. We could talk about, the other nutrients. Boron will help to enhance and assimilate that nitrogen. Moly, the molybdenum, the same way. That'll enhance nitrogen. You put those two together, phenomenal type return on investment. And so we're always, to your point, innovating. And I think I said it last time you and I talked. Here I am, surrounded by a bunch of guys and gals smarter than me, and I get to just sit back and just watch them work. It's kind of fun to watch Clay and Fix and Ben and Josh in our lab kind of, go back and forth and talk about, hey, what can we do here? What can we build to answer the needs for our growers? It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting to, be around you guys as you're working with, Dr. Perkins and his team, and also all of the folks in our Innovation Research Center over there at our laboratory, coming up with new versions of Coron Metra to meet the growing needs. And what's really interesting is, you touched on it, Jason, is a lot of the ideas are coming from the field, but we're also getting a lot of this information as we're in this information era. We've got more data today through our agri-intelligence platform that's telling us, right, Dr. Perkins, that these crops are kind of hungry for X, Y, Z, and now we can go to work and try to formulate something.
Right. Yeah, Derek Imran, our national agronomist, was just in the office, a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at what the limiting nutrients are, as a whole for the business, but then breaking it down by business unit as well. And, it's kind of eye-opening for what some of those nutrients are. And, I think that's why, the products that we have in the pipeline are going to help fit that need and, drive our 70 bushel beans to, something well higher than that.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting to see how data is becoming a bigger impacting factor into how we develop products.
It's what drives us, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I don't know how to phrase it any way other than that, but the data will show you time and time again. And I get a kick out of Clay, Dr. Perkins, and the other guys, and how much they love to spend time and look at data and try to find trends and try to make us better, really. So.
Yep. Okay, speaking of better, Coron Metra certainly is going to impact growers with their yield as it relates to adding nitrogen and some of the ENC formulation that you talked about. But there are some other benefits and some other factors that Coron Metra delivers to a grower that might be making an application, Jason, say for fungicides. There's a whole other area here of, I guess, side benefits that shouldn't be overlooked.
No doubt about it. And Clay and I were talking about that just the other day. We were actually in a meeting, and somebody was just showing us some data on how some things had been put out with the plane and stuff like that. And to make a long story short, what we found is that when you look at 2 gallons per acre of Coron Metra, that ended up being the equivalent of putting out 2.6 gallons per acre of water, just Coron alone.
Okay.
With an airplane. And we've seen that. So think about, with something like a fungicide or an insecticide, honestly, the more water, the better. Why?
Right.
Because it can get more coverage, better coverage. You get more water down inside the canopy, that's where we need this fungicide to go. We don't need the fungicide on the top 3 leaves of the corn plant, right?
Right.
And we need it down in the canopy where it is hot, humid, nasty, dark, where fungus loves to grow.
They love that area, don't they?
I mean, they do.
Yeah.
And
Coron Metra allows for that product to be penetrated a little bit deeper down in that canopy, right?
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what we're going to showcase at our Innovation Expo out here in a couple of weeks. And, that's a Coron demo plot where we're going to have water-sensitive paper and looking at fungicide alone or having a tank mix of Coron plus fungicide and how that penetration into that canopy, is benefiting from that Coron application.
Yeah,
I was talking with a grower just the other day, stink bugs, armyworms, he's seeing them a whole lot earlier this season than normal. And, so we know, as it's getting warmer, out there later in the day when we're making these applications, those insects are going down lower into the canopy. They're hiding, escaping the heat.
Right.
And so, having something like Coron in the tank can help, put that insecticide or that fungicide into the canopy where that's needed.
It's just that extra little oomph to take a product, whether it's an insecticide or a fungicide, get it to where it needs to be. And with that sticking power that's with Coron, that's really unique, it just keeps that AI just right there on the plant. You're exactly right. It keeps it where it needs to be. And then you team it with the nitrogen, can drive it right into the plant where it's supposed to go. It's just golly. I hardly ever spray anything at my house where I don't put Coron in it. Right.
Honestly, if I'm spraying for mosquitoes around my house, I'm putting Coron on it. You know why? Because I want it to stick to leaves. I want it to be there when those mosquitoes come by a little bit later that evening and pick up the little insecticide.
And now that doesn't necessarily mean we don't need an adjuvant with it. You certainly need your adjuvant to go along with it. But it's that multiplying effect, isn't it?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, the adjuvant, the surfactant is going to help it spread. And then after it dries down a little bit, then you're left with that. We've all seen it. If you hadn't seen it, shame on your salesperson for not showing you the demo. That sheen that you see with Coron, you see that sheen. So you get the spreading with your good quality, adjuvant, dynamic. One of my favorites, right? I'm going to spread it out over the leaf. Then after that kind of evaporates and dries down, now I'm left with that Coron sheen. And I know that my active, whether you call your active Coron, whether you call your active your fungicide, or whether you call your active your insecticide, I know it's sitting right there on that leaf where it's going to be working. Okay, Dr. Perkins, you mentioned it, the Innovation Expo being held here in Memphis at the Agri-Center International, home of the Helena Products Group Innovation Center.
July 9th, growers can come here and see that demonstration, how Coron Metra truly does impact the bottom leaves. Tell us a little bit more about that expo and that demonstration with Coron.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one. I think, everybody loves to see, we've heard the saying, a picture tells 1,000 words, but I think this demo is gonna tell 1,000 words as well, showing that penetration, that deposition, but talking about the expo, I mean, that's been one of my favorites over the past, the 5 years that I've been here. And I think we've got some exciting things out there in the field, not only with Coron, but, some of our other bioscience projects or resgenics or, looking at our corn herbicide pipeline.
We've got a lot of neat innovations that are taking out there, going to be on display and definitely be highlighted on July 9th here in Memphis at the Helena Products Group Innovation Center. Okay, guys, let's get down to it. As we opened up, we talked about what can we do as growers right now that's going to impact our return on investment as we look at these crops here. Let's break it down. From what we know, and Clay, you talked about it, 2,000 trials, you got a lot of history here. What kind of yields are we seeing? Let's focus on corn for right now. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, that, going with the Coron Metra, and we talked about, we've got several different versions, but, across the board, we're seeing an 8 bushel increase applying Coron Metra to the acre.
That's a lot of years of data, too.
A lot.
20 plus? Is that fair?
28 years of research total for Coron.
Okay.
So
and 8 bushel advantage. Okay, Jason, so let's break the math down. We're seeing 8 bushel advantage. What are the commodities right now? What's corn trading for?
I looked right before we came on, I think it was at 445.
Okay.
So,
So let's break that down. What are we looking at there?
8 bushels times 440 in my head. I'm not great at math. Let's call it $35.
I like to call that barnyard math. I'm a barnyard math guy. If you can get me close, we're going to win here. Okay, especially when you got 8 bushel advantage here. We got a little wiggle room to work
Exactly.
there. Okay, so about $35, and we've got on average what? And it's going to be a little different depending on the flavor and locations and that sort of thing. Geography plays on average. What are we?
I'll not even say average. Let's call it the high side.
The high side.
We got some
safe
spots.
than sorry, right?
Exactly, because we got some spots where maybe when we built it, urea was a little higher.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the market, supply, demand.
Yeah. So let $10
$10. Okay, so
on the high side.
So we're looking at a what advantage there?
Looks like 3.5 all day long to me.
3.5.
I can do that math.
Yeah, and I think that's the key here. Is you're looking at $25 an acre in your pocket on that situation. Take that over a couple thousand acres. That's a big deal.
Huge.
Yeah, and again, I want to come back to those win rates. What were they again on a percentage basis there, Dr. Perkins?
80% win rate on corn.
80%, and 2,000 trials. We're seeing that 8, but that's pretty good math.
It looks easy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and I hate to say that, you guys. I mean, there's nothing about farming easy,
right?
And even this, I mean, with the ROI here at 80%, I realize, it's tough to sit there and look on paper and say, all right. I know that's a tough decision.
It's a hard conversation with the banker right now too.
It is,
but
yes,
you got to look at the end game, not right now, because we got a farm to win.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's pivot on to soybeans. Talk to me about soybeans. What are we looking there, Clay?
2 bushel increase on soybeans, 70% win rate.
Those are pretty good stats too.
Yeah, I mean, that follows right
2
up.
bushels in soybeans. Okay, I'm leaning back to you. What are we looking at there?
Today, cash beans is 11.13. I mean, if you're looking at November, I believe it was about 11.40. So 2 bushels, that's 20. Call it $22.50.
$22.50, our barnyard math there, and we're looking at about what, $10 again?
Yeah, let's call it that. Easy
again,
math.
trying to be safe here and be real. Mm-hmm. So we're still looking at $11, $12, $13 in that range, aren't we?
Again, pretty good math.
Again, I like to come back to my barnyard math at $10 an acre net on that thing from an ROI standpoint. Again, 1,000 acres of soybeans. Boy, we're talking some serious cash now, aren't we?
We are. That's a pretty good chunk back to paying your operating loan for the year.
Yeah, your operating or your kid's tuition, right? Or that truck payment that you got to get.
Or daughter's wedding.
Yeah, your daughter's wedding. I got one of them coming up. Oh my goodness! But I think those are reality factors that we need to think about when we're talking about return on investment. It's hard looking at see that money, writing that check for a product, in season when you think you're kind of about done, but you're really not.
But the thing about it, I want to say one more thing on this, and I know it's a hard conversation, but you joked about Vegas earlier, and probably since I got into this industry, people will say that the farmers are the biggest gamblers in the world, right? Because they're doing this every year and they're making a huge investment on hoping at a return and stuff like that. But golly, it just seems like with Coron, you're not hoping for a return. I mean, you're seeing a return time and time again.
Very consistent.
It's just, So it's not a hope.
Right.
Honestly, it's because they say hope's not a strategy. Coron is a strategy.
It certainly should be a part of every grower's strategy as they go into their cropping systems. In a good year or a tough year, Coron Metra is certainly a part of your fertility system, or should be, because of that spoon feeding effect, right?
Exactly.
We can feed it when it needs it, and in some years it might need a little bit more, or in some years it may need a little less. You can manage that with your Helena representative, and I think it's important to note that every farm, every field, every acre is different. We're giving you some kind of high-level numbers here. Certainly have that conversation with your local representative to see what the impact is in your area. But boy, folks, from a national perspective, from what we're seeing across the nation, Coron Metra is a pretty good bet.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Yes.
Guys, I want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink as we talk about in-season ways to drive your return on investment, and in this case, leaning into Coron Metra.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Hey folks, welcome back to the FieldLink Podcast. I'm Macy Carter, a marketing specialist here at Helena, and we're visiting with Jody Lords today out of Nashville. Jody, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Macy, and welcome to you for your inaugural episode of jumping in and doing this. So we're excited to have a new person on the team and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Like you said, this is my inaugural episode, and I'm excited to be here and get to chat with you a little bit. Filling in for Bill this week, but excited for the opportunity. Jody, to start us off, let's kind of talk about this weird weather that we're experiencing. I heard on the radio the other day this term Godzilla El Nino. We've got a lot of rain coming through the Mid-South. Kind of talk about what you're seeing in terms of weather and how that's impacting our commodities currently.
Yeah, today's June 23rd, and this will drop in a couple days at the end of June. Always the biggest topic when we're talking about Northern Hemisphere crop development, especially the U.S. corn and bean crops. And as we have seen this transition from really, it was being called no Nino, it was very neutral, La Nina, El Nino readings, to now it is rapidly progressing towards a super El Nino, Godzilla, like you said. That normal type of transition has been what has happened so far, has been fairly consistent with prior strengthening like this, that the U.S. typically sees more rain than average. And with a couple later season heat scares, and we're starting to see that pop up in a couple forecasts, so we'll keep a close eye on that. But the thing where it's really been accurate this year is Europe is experiencing their worst drought, with several countries and several major cities experiencing their highest temperature ever over the weekend, and that is a sign of it. So that whether we want it or not, it's here, and it gives you confidence that it's something that we need to plan around. And as we see this, we're going to keep a close eye with pollination starting in the next week to 10 days of how much heat does work its way in to the Corn Belt during such a critical time for the crop.
Well, as you mentioned, it's June 23rd today. And speaking of what's coming up here soon, we've got the USDA acreage report dropping on June 30th. Talk a little bit about what you're expecting in that report and what are some of our biggest uncertainties at this point going into that report drop?
The biggest thing is this report is always a major market mover. you would think that by now everyone would have a pretty good idea what acreage was planted, what was not. But there is typically a very high level of lack of communication between the insurance companies, between the state USDA office, the FSAs, the locals, about what's in and what's not and what's being switched. So the first thing we always watch, especially in a really wet spring like we've seen, then you add on the high cost of fertilizer because of the war and the straits being closed, is we expect to see 1 to 2 million acres of corn switched over to beans from the initial end of March report that gave us a baseline to work with. And if that takes corn acres back to say 94 to 94.5 million, that becomes fairly significant because acreage loss and acreage switching is always far more important than adding or subtracting a bushel to final yield. Because if you take off 1.5 million acres with a 180 yield, all of a sudden you've taken off potentially 250 to 300 million bushels, and that's typically worth 20 to 30 cents of market movement. And in this case, what we hope for is that we are going to see a rally out of it.
Let's talk about that war in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, as you talked about. There's been a lot of conversation of, is the strait opening? Is the strait not? What are we kind of hearing at this point, and what could the strait's opening do to our fertilizer market?
What we have been following the closest, because obviously, if you're following Truth Social, there's something put out seemingly every 10 to 15 minutes by the administration or by the president about the negotiations or what's going on. But we watch what crude oil is doing, and crude oil went back to pre-bombing levels today, the lowest price since March 5th. When what that tells me is that the people who trade crude oil, and it is obviously a huge international market with tons of volume and participants, that those people have a high level of certainty that the straits are going to be fully reopened with a whole lot of oil coming back on the world market in fairly short order, because just in the past 10 days, crude oil's down over $20 a barrel. We probably have not seen that as quickly as we would like at the pump, but that always seems to take time. Prices always go up faster in the energy industry than they come down. So we'll start to see some relief at the pump, and keep an eye on it, because with Iran, what we found out, and probably what we've known for multiple presidential administrations, is you're never quite sure who you're dealing with. You've got one person saying the straits will never open, and then you have another group of people who were probably some of the people in Turkey this weekend who said, yes, we want peace and we'll let the nuclear inspectors come in. So that's what we're hopeful, that we found the coolest heads of their leadership and that we can have everything back to normal. And of course, the big thing about the straits, you see the high gas and diesel prices as kind of the first thing, but has been the fertilizer market for all of the world's agricultural participants, because you had prices shoot up so drastically, because about 30% of the world's nitrogen supply in many forms comes through there. And when you just cut it off cold turkey like that, it became a real pinch in a lot of areas. We were very fortunate this year, or just the timing of this, because had this happened in November or December, right before prepay started, the markets would have looked much, much differently, because we believe that about 75 to 80% of all the farmers secured all their nitrogen at much lower costs during prepay than they would have had they waited till the beginning of planting. So you can't really call it good news, bad news. It was just one of those things that certainly could have been a lot worse than it was. So we're looking forward to that. We are seeing a seasonal decline, as well as some more availability from my contacts that are in the fertilizer business. So we're hopeful that that is what's going to be the trend here forward. Because if you go back to pre-war, fully open gas prices, diesel prices, and fertilizer prices, things will start to look a lot better for late season application, side dressing, preparing your fields this fall. Just so many things that you need that those nitrogen sources to make sure you really squeeze out the best yield you can find.
Jody, are these sharply lower crude oil prices kind of pressuring the corn or soybean markets in any way?
Yeah, that's been the double-edged sword of this, because we saw in the rally that the price of ethanol, that bean oil that's used in biodiesel, and the other stocks for all of the renewables went up dramatically with the price of gas, because the margin became so much better. Everyone on the ethanol side or the blending side, they saw that they were going to had some really strong profitability. So it pulled corn and beans up because of the biofuel connection that we always have, because we're going to use, a third of this year's corn crop for U.S. ethanol production, both domestic use and exports. And we've got a growing footprint in biodiesel. So we are seeing a lot of demand for bean oil and the other oil-based canola oil, things like that, the non-edibles that you can use to do it. So we were happy with the rally because it took corn over $5 and it took beans over $12 on both new crops. And once crude started, and it's not, just a strange coincidence, once crude started to fall back, so did the price of corn and beans. So it's something that we don't realize it, but outside of the energy, the major energy players, the Exxons, the BPs of the world, agriculture has become such a mainstay for the biofuel industry that we benefit much more from higher gas prices than we are hurt by the cost of that fuel going up. So we'll see how it evens out. I think the market has pretty much priced that in, whether it overreacted at the beginning and is now overreacted to the bottom. The markets always tend to do that, but if we can just get a little bit of a weather scare, I think the price of crude oil is going to become less and less important for finding a fair value for corn and beans.
Jody, I know there's something else that you've been watching kind of closely this season, and it's been China's buying demand. So tell me a little bit about how China's balancing the U.S. and Brazil right now, and are there any specific actions that we need from China to kind of offset this bearish energy narrative?
China is probably the wild card. What we've been researching, writing about, and telling everybody that the three big things on the horizon, U.S. weather being one of them, how the corn crop finishes and the bean crop finishes, so another 2.5, 3 months of that, how the acreage shift comes out on the 30th. And the other thing that is just kind of smoldering in the background, hopefully, is that China agreed to a huge amount of new purchases in the second half of the year. And now that we're going to turn the page to July next week, that if China comes in and starts just a steady purchase program, we're going to start to see the markets react pretty quickly, because you're talking about at that point, if they live up to the trade deal, the original trade deal, plus the extra that was announced after that, we're really talking about another, potentially 200 to 300 million bushels of beans and over 500 million bushels of corn. So that you're talking on both of those, it's somewhere between a 40 and 60 cent positive impact on price if China comes back in. And the last time they did that, and it's a really good comparison, was in September of 2020. So everybody is just kind of getting settled in about COVID, is optimistic that we will soon have a vaccine, or at least heading that way. And then China came in and bought huge amounts for the next 4 to 6 months very consistently. And that was the last big bull market that we have. Now, I'm not saying just hold on to everything because China's coming to the rescue. They are still China, And I'm not entirely sure how much we can trust them to follow through on this. But to the point of this year, on the original deal, they are on pace to hit all of those marks. So we've got a little bit more confidence. And really, the one thing that would turn this into a China market very quickly is they have a 10% tariff on importing U.S. corn and beans. And if they go through the political maneuvering to drop that, and that makes it to the world market, everybody's going to realize that they're getting ready to start buying U.S. corn. Right now, it's just kind of a funny time for them to bypass South America's harvest because it's cheaper. Harvest prices are always lower because of basis. And we expect that within the next, 3 to 5 weeks, it sounds like it's a long way away, but it's really not, in the course of a marketing year, that we will start to see more consistent Chinese purchases. And if you add up, let's have a weather scare in the U.S., let's shift some corn acres over to beans, then let's have China show up as a regular buyer. We've got some optimism that we don't think corn's going to go back to the highs, but it can certainly, I could certainly see a 30, 40, maybe even more if the weather turns out a little worse than we expect, rally for corn as we move through the rest of the summer. So got some optimism, but it's always hard to be patient on being happy because you want to be happy right now. So, but we'll see where it goes. And there is some reason, to be optimistic about it.
Well, Jody, there's no lack of things to keep your eyes on in the market right now. There's a lot going on. So what are kind of some of your biggest takeaways or the biggest things you're keeping your eye on in the next couple of weeks? And what should growers be thinking about in terms of near-term marketing?
Well, there are really two things at these low prices because we've gone back to some lower levels that we hoped we wouldn't get to before, and it seems like it's fair value. But whenever the futures price comes down sharply, it always stops farmers selling to the elevator. And at that point, the elevators will improve their basis to help keep the farmers' bin doors open so they're selling it to them. So look at the basis levels, if and how much they've improved in your area, and maybe you lock in some basis that you apply hopefully to later sales. Because if you get if basis for corn, just give it this, is improved 15 cents, and then from here we get a 20-cent rally, all of a sudden you've got a 35-cent better corn price than we have as we sit here today. So keep an eye on things like that because you always think, the price is bad, but there are always two parts to that cash price, basis being the smaller of the two, but futures being the other. And on the opposite side of that, if you are an end user, if you are a feeder, if you have a lot of livestock and need corn, bean meal, beans, whatever the case may be, to crush for feed, you can really start looking at it that with especially the high margins in cattle and the high prices in cattle, that this break could really help lower your feed costs, because considering where we were, you're buying what amounts to almost a 70-cent discount than what it was going to cost you 6-7 weeks ago. So end users buy, the producers look at basis, and there are always strategies that we have with options, with futures, and everybody is always welcome to reach out to us, reach out to Brady or me, and to go through the FieldLink website, get signed up for the texts, get signed up for the emails. All of our contact information will be in there, and we're always happy to talk to anyone about any of the questions they may have about it.
Well, Jody, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the FieldLink Podcast. Like Jody said, you can learn more about Jody's insights on his daily emails and through the text messages, which you can find on helenaagri.com. Jody, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Macy, and welcome to the team.
Thank you very much.
Be sure to make plans to join us in Memphis, Tennessee for the Innovation Expo on July 9th. Explore the latest innovations from the Helena Products Group and learn about the latest agronomy, seed, and pipeline innovations coming to you from Helena. Contact your Helena representative to reserve your spot today.